members are meeting online via Zoom web conference. This meeting is being live streamed and cable broadcast by Easton's Community Access Television, which is on Comcast 98, Verizon 23, and on ECAT's website, www.eastoncat.org. If you're watching this at home and you have a question or a comment, you can email mblanchard, BLANCHARD, at easton.ma.us, or pose your question on the Q&A feature of the Zoom portal. Please remember to include your name and street address for our minutes. At this time, I'd like to ask each select board member to state their name to ensure that we have a quorum.
Craig Barger. Chuck King.
Mark Lamb.
And Dottie Fulgenetti. And we'll note that Selectman Tom Broussard is not here for this meeting. All right, so the first on the agenda is the Human Rights Committee update. Hold on.
Liz said she might be a little bit late, so I don't know if she's on.
She does not appear to be. We could come back to that, Craig and Dottie, if you'd like.
Sure.
She said she had to go do something. She was running late.
Do we want to go to the?
Oh no, she is now here.
Oh,
Okay, great.
okay. So the Human Rights Committee Chair, Elizabeth Bornstein, is going to provide the Select Board with an update about the committee's ongoing efforts surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusivity, and specifically about the schedule of listening sessions and topics for this year and next year. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hey, thanks for having me. I can give sort of a brief overview of what the HRC has been doing in the last, I would say, part of 2020 and what we have planned so far for listening sessions. So we earlier in the year had done another order for Hate Has No Home Here signs, which we had distributed around town thanks to generous grants from Stonehill money, I believe. We developed a promotional video for the committee to explain what our role is. It features many town residents talking about what human rights mean to them, and that is up on our website and was done in partnership with ECAT. We've been significantly growing our ally list. These are people in town supportive of our mission who are willing to act as promoters and helpers and volunteers back when we could have events and needed volunteers. And so right now their main job is to provide feedback or to help solicit interest and support for our events. So a recent way we've used our ally list is in getting feedback on the religious holiday observance calendar, which we have been creating and updating and providing to the school system every year for the last couple years. The purpose of the calendar is to highlight religious holidays that are not federally observed and that might fall either on a school day or on a weekend during the school year, and just providing some cultural literacy about what it might mean to observe this holiday, and particularly in a school setting, what the implications are. Namely, might the student miss school? Are there dietary considerations? Might the student need an extra day for homework? So our ally list is very helpful in providing feedback on a variety of religions. We have close to a dozen listed on there that are represented in our community, either because there are houses of worship in our community or because members of our community identify with those religions. We have an upcoming training Wednesday, actually, with Liza Tallison to talking about race and racism as a family. This is family programming available and intended for people of all ages, but kind of an age 10 and up target audience for kids. So these are conversations we want families to be having together. We partnered with RMK and the library over the summer with the book club discussions related to anti-racism and unconscious bias. And the first listening session that Dottie was referring to was related to race and people of different racial backgrounds. So it was a little bit of a walk in my shoes. What is it like to be someone who is non-Caucasian in our society? The next session that the Human Rights Committee has coming up is tentatively scheduled for the beginning of December, and this will be focused on religion as we get towards a lot of holidays. The focus will be on what it is like to be non-Christian in a Christian-centric society. So just some perspective both on major religions and what it might be to experience religions that the majority of the culture do not celebrate or observe.
That's great. I just want to, you had mentioned the acronym RMK. For those that don't know what that means, that's Raising Multicultural Kids. And they have a website, raisingmulticulturalkids.com, I think it is.
Probably
And .org. And then the human rights website is on the town's webpage under boards and committees for the Human Rights Committee. So I've attended some of those events myself and was disappointed. The book club meeting is tonight, and I would just listen to up to like chapter 7 of the book. I'm very excited about the things that you're doing and super excited about the way that you're partnering with other organizations as well, the library, Raising Multicultural Kids. And I think that that's really, I see what other towns are doing, and I think that we're very well ahead of the pack. You've just got a great group of people on your committee, and you're doing amazing work. So we're very grateful to that. Craig, do you want to jump in since you're on that committee also?
Well, I have to echo what you just said, Dottie, that this is a dynamic group of individuals, and I've been very pleased and proud to be part of that. And I also wanted to mention that the Old Colony Y is partnering with us on Wednesday night. They have been a partner before. They're very excited about being involved with the Human Rights Committee as well. And I'm excited by the number of people who have agreed to be allies and participate. But I think it's worth for people to sit and watch the Human Rights Committee on the, what is it, the second Tuesday of the month, Liz?
In November, it's going to be, we haven't moved it to the first, no, we moved it to the second because the first is November 3rd. Yeah. So our next meeting in November will be the 10th, the second Tuesday, but in prior months, it's the first Tuesday.
It's been an exciting opportunity for me to learn from other members of the committee, and I'm pleased to be part of it.
Chuck, do you have any comments or thoughts?
I appreciate Elizabeth for coming here this evening, and I can see that it's a very active group by what she's relaying to us. The use of her resources is very well laid out, and the formation of a network and allies in the community, and they're reaching out to the schools is very important. So I appreciate all that the committee is doing.
Mark?
Just thank you for all that you're doing. I think now more than ever this is needed. And, a year, 2 years ago, I don't think you guys were doing all of this. And in the wake of a lot of things going on, you guys have really pulled together a lot and enlightened a lot of people, myself included. So thank you.
Well, I will say that, with some of the turbulence that we've had in the past couple of years around issues of race, equity, cultural confusion, I would say, you had a dinner with 12 strangers, I think it might have been called, where you could pick a restaurant and go to meet with people, just have conversations with people that you wouldn't normally meet in your world. And some of these things that you've done, or even the Unity Project, that was just such an exciting project at the sheep pasture that was interactive with people, always coming up with great ideas. But whenever something's come up in the community that I am curious about or how to handle something, Elizabeth, you've been my go-to person, and I really appreciated that I can talk through and understand and learn from you. And with Kelly Lamb as well, she's been an amazing asset. So when we first started to reinvigorate the Human Rights Committee, what I had envisioned is exactly where we are right now, not just with the group of volunteers, but also that list of allies, really bringing the community in, and partnerships. The Y, the library, RMK, Stonehill, That's amazing to bring all of those institutions together to work on these causes. I had said several months ago that I wanted the select board to do some listening sessions. And when we had spoken and I spoke with Kelly, you're already in those processes. And, you know, I think that our role right now is for the select board to support what you're already doing. And I know everybody on this board does. I think that we would like to stay very closely connected so that in the future we can do something. And, you know, part of what is really putting a damper on this is COVID, because these conversations are best had in person, but you're just doing remarkable work around some of those obstacles, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you. We are very grateful for the support we've had from the town and the select board. So both Connor and all of the select board members have really been both responsive and supportive. I should also mention the Easton Clergy Association is partnering with us for the December event. So I know like all of the Easton clergy have their own sort of working group, and our work only grows with the support from the community. So we encourage people to check out our website, which we keep full and up to date on the town's webpage if you look under committees. And if people are interested in joining our ally list, our email is humanrights@easton.ma.us, and we'd be happy to add you and answer any questions people have.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here tonight.
All right,
Thanks, Liz.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay. Next up, we have a discussion with Blackridge 40B's proposal, the preliminary staff and financial impact analysis, and talking about the possible permitting timeline for 87 and 91 Union Street. Connor?
Sure. So attached in your packet, which is also available online, is a relatively detailed analysis that Stephanie and I pulled together with a lot of assistance from town and school staff. I would ask Mike, I think we have Stephanie here, as well as Mr. Lincoln and his counsel, if they could just be moved into the panel. That would be helpful. I'll try to hit some of the highlights of this. It's an 11-page document, and I'll spare the board reading the whole thing into the record. It is online again for anyone who's interested in trying to follow along, and I'll try to just hit some of the main points that the board had raised, I believe, at 2 meetings ago in September. So we've reviewed the information submitted so far by Conoco Building for a proposed 40B development comprised of 2 buildings with a total of 108 rental units on a 7.6-acre parcel of land on Union Street, the majority of which is in Easton and a small portion of which is in the city of Brockton. Roughly half of these would be 1-bedroom, and the remainder would be mostly 2-bedroom and 12 3-bedroom units. The site currently has several structures on it, a 1795 Cape-style home, a more modern home, and some buildings associated with a discontinued precast concrete operation. We are not new to this. We have had obviously quite a bit of housing development in Easton in the past 10 years. We've had a few different 40B proposals that have gone through the staff analysis, permitting, construction, and occupation pipeline. So we are able to pretty readily at this point draw on our past experiences and actual data rather than having to rely on some type of proprietary consultant formula. We can, if we're curious the type of revenue these projects generate, we can look to other comparably sized ones within the community. If we're curious about how many school-aged children tend to live in these types of proposals, we can look to other examples within the community. And so that's what we've done. So the document has specific recommendations highlighted throughout from a variety of different departments and boards. Dottie, if you want, I could try to walk through just some of those recommendations, talk about the some of the preliminary feedback from departments, some estimates on public safety, and school impacts and some revenue items. And then from there, we have the developer is here that can answer any questions from the board after you've had time to review this. Would that work?
Sure, I'd appreciate that. At our last meeting, the board had specific questions, and I think that you've captured all of them and then some in this report. So I think it's definitely worthwhile to go through them.
Sure. So the first section of a report, starting on the first page, is an analysis of the affordable housing components. The applicant proposed 25% of the units to be affordable at 80% area mean income, therefore under 40B, which is the state's affordable housing development law. That would add all units, including the market rate rentals, to our subsidized housing inventory to help further our inventory there and keep us in compliance with state law. We every year have the planning department come in and do a public refresher and reminder of where we stand with our housing inventory, both from an actual constructed standpoint as well as what is permitted and in the pipeline. And right now we're over the 10% threshold required by state law, which is great. However, every 10 years, when there's the federal decennial census, your total housing units get recounted. And so we're estimating that once that happens, we're going to need, roughly 80 more units. We do have other projects, Queesit Commons, for example, that are in the permitting pipeline that once those are built out could get us over that 10% again. And so as we've, I think, been pretty clear about this whole time, this is not a project that necessarily the board must do or else it loses safe harbor. But nonetheless, it would certainly add some units and make that much more of a sure thing after the census recount. So the Affordable Housing Trust Board met on September 30th. They discussed this proposal. And this was an item that did come up with the board, I believe. The trust encouraged more affordable and market rate 3-bedroom units as a way to increase attainable family workforce housing options in Easton. The Affordable Housing Trust also encouraged considering setting the affordability target at the 50% area mean income standard rather than the more typical 80s. So under 40B, you can have a quarter of the units at that 80% area mean income threshold. Or alternatively, you could do 20% of the units, 1/5 of them, at 50% area mean income. I believe, for informational purposes, the median family income in Easton this year, according to HUD, is $121,000. So when you say 80% income, you're not, 80% of 121,000 is still a relatively meaningful income. Just wanted to add some context there for folks at home who may not work with this kind of stuff frequently. So that's the Affordable Housing Trust feedback there. I don't know, Chuck, if you were at a meeting, if there's anything additional you want to add.
No, you summed it up. You summed it up well, Connor.
Okay, great.
Connor, I think Shovelworks had a mix of 80% and 50% in the same project. One of the things that I hear the most from people, especially young people my kids' age, is that they're never going to be able to find a place to live in Easton until, their parents pass their house down to them because there's just no affordable place. I remember, one of our finance committee members, one of the younger guys that started, we asked in his interview, are you planning to be on the committee for a while? And he says, well, it depends if I can afford to live in Easton. So I think, considering the 50 and the 80 might be worthwhile. Also, people looking to downsize when they have a big house and they're trying to sell that to buy another house, you almost can't find anything. And a lot of people are really wanting to stay in this town. And I know that a lot of the people at Avalon, that is one of the groups of people, is people that were downsizing. So there may also be some incentives to go with the 80 and the 50. It might be worth looking into.
Sure, and those are all good points that the analysis picked up on a few of those later that we'll certainly touch on. So the second section of this report solicited feedback from staff on the project site and layout itself. Again, I'm noting this just for the sake of transparency because we're in the meeting, but all of this is in the public report. It's underlined, it's very clear, and the developer has a copy of this as well. Staff indicated that moving the access point further south would improve visibility for vehicles exiting left onto Union Street. Consideration should be given to offsetting sections of the buildings to provide a more inviting scale. The open space that is there, whatever open space would be there following building construction, should remain accessible and available to any hypothetical residents so that they can access that and enjoy it. And as I noted in the introduction of this, summarizing the site, there is a historically significant circa 1795 home that is a rare surviving example of 18th century domestic architecture in Easton, and retention and rehabilitation of that would be very strongly encouraged. Before getting into the weeds a little bit more, if this were to move forward at all, specific feedback would end up being sought from, even though through the comprehensive permitting process you go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, Easton has always sought feedback from other boards and committees that would typically have input, such as the Historical Commission in this example. And that is one of mine and Stephanie's recommendations, that if the board is amenable to this project, that prior to it getting into the formalities of a comprehensive permit process with the Zoning Board of Appeals, you do solicit input from committees, planning, Concom, historical, etc. Parking, the concept plan shows 187 parking spaces, which equates to about 1 3/4 parking spaces per unit. Our town zoning bylaw only requires 1 1/4, so it's recommended the developer consider reducing that amount of parking. Reduced parking reduces impervious surface, improves the amount of green space available. From a public safety perspective, as far as the layout of the site, the applicant, as with any development, would be required to meet with the fire chief, the inspector of buildings, and ensure the site and all buildings proposed would meet all code and safety requirements, including, I believe, due to the size of these buildings, the provision of sprinklers, which is an important part of service impact, particularly given the location of the site. The site itself is located on the Easton Brockton line. The nearest fire station is 3.7 miles southwest on Depot Street. There are other public safety facilities in the city of Brockton that are actually closer. And the distance from our fire stations where our ambulances are dispatched from is somewhat offset on the other end, that because this is on the Brockton line, it's actually very, very proximal to area hospitals. So that could be, to an extent, a certain challenge if the town was rendering ambulance aid elsewhere in town, getting an ambulance there quickly. On the flip side of benefit is once someone is in the ambulance, it is quite close to emergency medical facilities. There was a kind of a small list of particulars from the fire chief that I won't reiterate fully here, but giving a kind of preview to the developer who has worked with the town before. I don't think anything in there is necessarily a large surprise, but one of the things of concern with any multi-level residential unit is obviously the provision of elevators is great. If the elevators could be EMS friendly, that's great, but I also understand that is not without cost. So I'd be interested to hear from the developer on that. From a traffic perspective, Union Street is a rural road connecting two population centers, obviously, Easton and Brockton. It's located about 1 mile from Route 24. It has been recently paved, and it's in a good state of repair. And also in Easton, the Union and Washington Street intersection was recently pretty significantly improved as part of a Mass DOT project with signalization and lane restriping. Nonetheless, if the project is to proceed, it would be valuable for the developer to conduct a traffic study. Water and sewer is an area that we spoke about at some length last month. The developers indicated that they are open to seeking sewer from the city of Brockton, given how close it is. And that, from a public works perspective, there is no objection to that. However, DPW and the Water Division have indicated that if the property is to connect to Brockton Sewer, it would be optimal if it also had Brockton Water. On the flip side, if Easton Water is a priority, on-site treatment would be preferable from Public Works standpoint. So basically, wherever water is coming from sewer should be as well, is Public Works input there. And then from a wetlands and environmental resources perspective, permitting by Concom would be required because wetland resource areas do exist on adjacent properties within 100 feet of a site. Communications with the staff are recommended early in plan development, and the comprehensive permit application to the zoning board should note any waiver requests to the extent they exist, if they're applicable. So before getting into some more kind of quantitative analysis on service calls, school-aged children, and monetary items, does the board have any feedback or questions about any of those more kind of qualitative pieces of feedback from staff, or anything that Stephanie or the developer want to add before we move on?
Move on to the continuation of the presentation.
Yes.
No, there'll be questions for at the end, right? Questions, comments, or concerns?
Fair enough. Dottie, do you want me to just get through everything first before we have any?
Sure. I think that before Connor went into the revenues part of it, he just wanted to see if there was any questions on this part. And I'd also like to just remind any of the attendees that if you have questions, put them into the Q&A and we'll read those and answer those as well.
I just have one question for Connor, if that's okay, Dottie. Relative to the water main in that area, there's a comment that it's only 6 inches in diameter and it may need to be upgraded. Does that upgrade, number one, would that be because if the water comes from Easton, or only if the water comes from Brockton? Does that mean we don't need to do anything with that that line?
If water was provided from Brockton, there no changes to our water infrastructure would be necessary.
So if water, we can't get sewer and water from Brockton, we'd have to upgrade that pipe.
Potentially, it would require a further analysis, but that's potentially the case. Yes.
Could that be part of mitigation if we have to do that, or?
It could be, but as I won't speak for the developer, but traditionally with any project, there's a pro forma of what makes financial sense for a developer, and there's a pot of finite money to work with, and so. Controlling all other things, if there's another source of water that does not require mitigation funds to be diverted in that way, and they can instead be used for other improvements, that would be desirable, in my opinion.
One other question. Dottie raised the issue of 80% versus 50%, or some mix of that. That's doable, Dottie, in terms of what you say Shovel Works has done?
Well, I know that Shovel Works did that, but that's really between the developer and the financing agency. So that's all part of the whole package. If it can be done or not in this instance, I'm not sure.
All right, thank you.
So, moving into some number crunching for municipal services, we typically look at public safety and schools. Those are the largest service buckets we have. And previous 40B proposals included consultant-generated estimates of calls for service for public safety. So we'll start there. Notably, Avalon, the 290-unit Avalon project back in 2014. Since 2014, numerous multi-unit developments have been permitted, constructed, completed, and occupied, and of a variety of different sizes, which actually gives us a pretty good data set to work with and to pull from actual numbers, which is great. So what we did was we pulled 3 years worth of data from police, fire, and EMS, which is run by fire, for what their actual annual calls for service are at 3 different multi-unit housing developments. Avalon, the first one, so that's 290 units. That's the largest we have. Shovel Works, which is 113 units. So that's kind of comparably sized from a unit perspective. And then 244 Washington Street, which is 44 units right down the road from Town Hall. So we felt that was a good mix of project size and, on a couple of different ends of town. And what we did is we got the average of those annual calls for 17, 18, and 19 from each of those departments and put them into the table that you have, the color-coded table on page 5 of your analysis. And so what we've seen is that the average per unit calls for these multi-unit developments can be turned into a factor, and you can make assumptions about Blackridge. So if you look at police annual calls, so police receive almost 15,000 calls for service a year. On average, 31 go to Avalon, 55 go to Shovelworks, and 24 go to 244 Washington Street. If you look at the mean there, it's about 0.38 calls per unit at these developments. In Blackridge's case, it means you could forecast roughly 41 calls to the police department per year out of their 15,000 annually. Pulling the same kind of metrics for the fire department, 23 calls per year to Avalon, 5 2/3 a year on average to Shovelworks, and 3 1/3 on average to 244 Washington Street. So you could forecast roughly 7.5 calls a year to Blackridge based on its size and our history with other departments. EMS, fire department, spends a majority of its services on ambulance services. Again, Avalon on average 28 calls a year, Shovelworks about 19 2/3, and 5 to 244 Washington Street. So if you were using that to make a forecast about Blackridge, you're looking at just below 14 calls a year. So the police chief indicated he believes that the department could absorb those 41 calls within existing staff levels. I always think it's important to note, and the board knows this, and it's good to reiterate, that previous financial impact analysis have indicated when our staff was slightly lower that we should add staff. Other analyses have indicated that too, including the audit in 2016. We're at 1 net FTE higher in the police department than we were when those recommendations were made. So police staffing is still very lean, as is consistent with nearly all of our departments. So when I report that the chief indicates that they can absorb it and they will make it work, that doesn't mean that they have tons of extra staff. They do not. They're just a very can-do department, as all of ours are. Fire chief has indicated that while those projected incremental increases of fire and EMS calls of 7.5 and just under 14 respectively don't themselves present any kind of extraordinary challenge to the department, they do add to the overall increase in call volume and possible medical transports that the department has witnessed in the past 10 years. Particularly for ambulance services, on an annual basis, medical transports in the department have increased from just about 1,200 back in 2010 to over 2,000 a year last year, as the town's developed not only residential housing, and this I think is a really important thing to highlight for the board and for the public. Folks often, when people look at the work the board is doing, and they look at the work the planning board is doing, and they look at the types of projects that come before the community, they look at, it is common that people look at housing and say, oh, well, that's resource intensive. Commercial is great, let's do commercial. Certain types of commercial can be resource intensive as well. So for example, the ambulance calls have gone from 1,200 to just over 2,000. A lot of this is attributable to the growth of assisted living, urgent care, and other medical offices in the community, which is a growing part of the broader regional economy. They drive the disproportionate number of calls. Specifically, in 2019, more than 20% of all ambulance calls or transports in Easton, so 416 ambulance transports out of about 2,000, originated from 3 addresses: an assisted living facility, a nursing home, and an urgent care center. I'm not criticizing those business types at all. That comes with the business. I'm just using that as an important piece of data to highlight that, for comparison, Avalon is the largest multi-unit housing we have, and it just barely makes the top 15 ambulance list with less than 1% of their transports at 19 last year. That does not mean it's not an impact. It is. It's just to draw attention to the fact that no type of development is completely without impact. So the increased use of ambulance services in Easton has been supported on the operational side with the provision of 4 additional firefighters funded through the SAFER grant and running a second ambulance to make those calls happen. And it's also brought an increase of ambulance revenue. However, again, out of respect for the chief and his department, same as Gary Sullivan, it should be noted that staff levels in the fire department, even with those SAFER firefighters, is still leaner than most communities of our size. So given the geographic location of Blackledge, I mentioned before, there could potentially be ambulance times that are longer than desirable for waiting. You would rely on mutual aid in those circumstances. And on the flip side, a positive side of that same kind of geospatial piece is that people would be closer to area medical providers. Again, if this is to move forward, the developer will have plenty of time to meet with the fire chief and other department heads, and something to look at would be the size and structure of the elevators in the building, which could help improve response times compared to physically coming up and down 3 flights of stairs. Both our police and fire departments operate out of antiquated and outdated municipal facilities. I think the question actually came up at our last meeting in the context about CPA funding for the town hall, and we were talking about the operations of town hall, and I made the point then that town hall is basically the absolute bottom of the priority list for me from an operational perspective. We can make it work. Beyond the fact that it's a beautiful historic building, our public safety and public works structures are not necessarily beautiful historic buildings, and they're quite antiquated and don't meet the operational needs of our community, which the Public Works Director noted in a report to the Municipal Building Committee in 2019, pre-COVID, which feels like 5 lifetimes ago. But it's important to keep those things in mind. It's also worth noting the only public safety building that's not antiquated any longer is Station 2, and that was because it was rebuilt as part of a developer's agreement for Queeset Commons, which was another cooperative development the board struck with a housing development in Easton. So given the significant increase in service volume borne by those departments over the previous decade, as well as the relative remoteness of the site from existing fire stations and the antiquated nature of those, it may be worth the board keeping public safety and public health in mind if this conversation is to advance to any kind of mitigation contemplation. So as far as school enrollment, that's another area that people rightfully are very interested in. It's any residential development would bring with it service-related costs, including for education. Looking at 4 residential rental complexes built in the past 10 years. So we have Avalon, 244 Washington Street, Shovelworks, and we added Queeset Commons to this. Those 4 projects have 491 units of housing. And as of 2019, we didn't want to use enrollment data for this fall because COVID kind of has had an impact there across the Commonwealth and the United States. So we wanted to do a more fair apples to apples comparison of 2010 to 2019. So in 2019, those 491 housing units had 119 school-aged children in them. 81 of them are new to Easton, while 38 of them relocated from within the town. So what these numbers show is that recent multi-unit housing developments in Easton are home to about half as many children per unit as a single-family home on average. So specifically, these 491 units, you have 0.24 kids per unit, of which only 0.16 is new to the district. So basically for every 100 rental units that gets constructed on average in Easton, you have 24 total children. 16 of them are new to the district. That's half of single-family homes, which themselves average at 0.48 school-age kids per home. So if Blackledge were to mirror the existing trends that, again, these aren't strange proprietary formulas. These are from our actual numbers pulled from the public schools. if Blackledge were to mirror those existing experiences, we could estimate that the 108 units would bring approximately 26 school-age children, with 17 of those being new, and 9 of them being relocated from within the community. This speaks to the point that Dottie was making, that there's a variety of different needs for housing, not just in Easton, but in Massachusetts and in the United States in general, for families of all shapes, sizes, and types. Some single adults, divorcees, empty nesters, younger families with maybe one kid, a couple of larger families. So despite the addition of those 491 units of 40B and 40R housing this decade, along with other more traditional single-family housing built through the normal permitting process that we estimate around 661 since 2010, enrollment has gone down slightly from 3,893 at the beginning of this decade, which was a peak, to 3,632. And that is not because there's something wrong here. This is mirroring broader demographic trends in the post-recession era, the last recession, not the one we're actively in the middle of declining birth rates in the United States and smaller household sizes. Back in May of 2019, the CDC issued a report noting that the birth rate in the United States had hit almost a 2-decade low. There's a lot of different reasons for that. One of them is that, similar to the anecdote, Dottie, you noted of a younger member of one of our committees just being frank that he may not be able to afford to live here and stay on a committee. Professional or all young families now struggle. The affordability of housing is outrageous in the Northeast region of the United States, and that puts a large damper on the amount of children people have. It weighs heavily on people. Student debt weighs heavily on the amount of children that people have. Both parents having to work puts a burden on families. And so it is very common now. I believe the average children born by a college-educated couple is 0.8. Having a family is very expensive. In a presentation technically unrelated to housing that I was in with the MMA's Fiscal Policy Committee, where they were looking at the Commonwealth's current budget situation, the cost of housing, for anyone who's sold a house recently or is trying to buy one, and you could attest to this, continues to rise really aggressively in this area. And in Massachusetts, the median price of a home has gone up 20% in the past 18 months. So even if you're working a great job, you probably didn't get a 20% salary increase in the past 18 months. So it's a real challenge for folks to find affordable housing. And you see that in other data, including in birth rates and family size. So it's a really long-winded way of me saying that although in Easton you've seen more units of housing made available, you have not seen enrollment increase. That mirrors broader trends in the region and in the country. Families are just looking different for a lot of different reasons. So making different types of housing available, some smaller units, smaller bedroom counts, can fit the needs of different folks, like to Dottie's point, divorcees or empty nesters, widows, widowers, young families, single adults, a variety of needs. So all of that having been said, none of that is to say that higher density housing can't have an impact. It certainly can. And it can also have an impact on enrollment on a per school basis based on its location. This is something we noted with Avalon's expansion last year. And in this case, being at Union Street, if this was built overnight, that would have a disproportionate impact on enrollment for kids at Monroe Hall compared to Parkview. However, depending on if this project moves forward at all, and if it does, the timing of it, by the time it's done and folks move in, that may be a moot point because the new Bland James Elementary School for the entire community may be constructed at that point. So wanted to note that. Finally, municipal revenue analysis. I worked with the finance department to pull some analyses together. The most recent assessed value of the two sites, 87 and 91 Union Street, as they exist today, is that they're valued at roughly $710,000. Their annual real estate tax bill is just under 11 grand. doing an analysis, a capitalization rate analysis from the assessor's office of this proposal for Black Ledge, we would assume a total value of roughly 18 million and a property tax bill based on our current tax rate of 275,000 compared to the 11,000 now. Again, I'm on page 7 and 8 of this analysis, and the cap rate analysis is borne out by the assessor on the next page. It's important to note that that estimated tax bill would be new growth, which would permanently increase the levy. So 275,000. For perspective, we typically budget 700,000 in new growth for the entire town on an annual basis. Given the current volatility in the economy and given the current volatility in other key municipal revenue accounts like state aid, as well as local receipts, which are much more elastic to the general economy, things like meals tax, etc. New growth will continue to be an incredibly important revenue category for the town to keep an eye on. We also looked at excise tax billing. Obviously, it pales in comparison to property tax, but we could look at the amount of vehicles and excise bills that are multi-unit developments throughout town, and we would expect roughly 148 vehicles here paying about 22,500 of recurring revenue a year. So that plus property tax are just shy of 300,000 of recurring revenue annually. If you look at one-time revenue, like building permit fees, the 290-unit Avalon project generated 531,000 in building permit fees. Assuming a proportional amount of fees on a per unit basis, it's similarly garden-styled units here, you would be looking at just shy of 200,000. That estimate may be conservative as fees are estimated on construction costs, which have increased since 2015 and 16, and certain building permit fees have increased since then as well. So that I've not been succinct, so I apologize. That's a lot of the nitty-gritty. There are recommendations for next steps. I think that makes the most sense to do after the board asks questions and gets feedback from the developer, and anything else from myself or Stephanie as well.
Tom is in the attendee room. If Michael could the live meeting, that would be great. Excellent. So Lisa, if you just want to note for the minutes that Tom came to the meeting at 5:47. Hi, Tom.
Good evening, everybody.
Even Tom.
So we
Hey,
just
Tom.
did a recap of the Black Ledge. I want to say Black Ridge.
Yeah, I made a mistake writing Black Ridge in a couple of places. It's Black Ledge. I apologize.
Sounds like a country and western kind of a song. Anyway, we just went through the details of that, and now we're opening it up for questions. So I'm not sure if you've had a chance to review the information, but we'll start with Craig to go through the questions, and I'll let you go last or jump in, after Craig if you want. But Craig, if you want to pose any questions.
And I don't have any questions, but I did want to thank Connor and Stephanie and whomever else was involved. A very comprehensive report, which I read thoroughly several times today. So thank you for that, Connor. And if I have any questions, I'll jump in a little bit later.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Do you want me to pass you, Tom, or do you want
If
to?
it's okay, I'll circle back at the end, if that's all right.
Sure. Chuck?
It was an excellent analysis. I agree with Craig on that. A couple of areas that had me really thinking about was the public safety services. I think however you twist it, in terms of, say, a personal injury at a site like that that's fairly far away from the nearest fire station, you have to add on and really make the distance between the fire station and the hospital, let's say, to be a very important factor. I agree, but I think that some of the mitigation measures that we brought forward, that you brought forward with your staff, are good ones too, such as the making the elevators and other access points more accessible for the EMS, because it's really true that the ambulance to the injured person is the more critical step of the two. Because once that ambulance gets the injured person, I know from experience that it's like a small hospital in that ambulance, and the ambulance crew and the fire crew does a great job of seeing what that person needs in between there and the nearest hospital. But it still is an important factor to mitigate in the way I just mentioned, the distance, the extra distance that's taken to an extreme part of the town in this case. So the other thing was some of the mitigation factors that we're already bringing into the situation, knowing that we as a board are one entry kind of aspect to this kind of project, and the other boards that you mentioned that get into much more detail about the various things, is that we at least are in a position where we can say in a nice way, if it was not the case, that maybe you ought to try some other project. But this is a good project, and this is a good analysis of it.
Thanks, Chuck. Those are great points. Mark.
Yes, I'd like to take a step back. I was looking at the study, and I looked at the study and I looked at it, that it's done in a vacuum, right? So we're looking at that study as if this is the sole case or the sole impact, not as the study outlines in conjunction with existing projects that are already out there and that are constructed and occupied. But then I started to think of what is in the pipeline here in Easton. And I think that's something that I wasn't even thinking about in our last meeting. What do we have in the pipeline? And we have a lot of projects in the pipeline that aren't counted towards the impact or the summation of all those projects. Like we have Rick, Mr. Lincoln, your project on Foundry Street, those units. So you would have to add whatever the impact that is to the impact of this. So the Foundry Street project, the additional units in Avalon, I think that was 44 units. You would have to actually add the impact of that project to this. You have mixed use of Five Corners. There's various mixed use of Five Corners. Ed Walsh's Korea's Plaza project. So it's all of those, and that's all that I know. There might be other things in the pipeline that I'm unaware of. So that's everything that you actually have to add up, because if we ask the police chief or fire chief how this one project will impact them, they might look at it and say, well, this is going to add 40 calls per a year, but it's actually all of them, because they'll all hit in and around the same year or 2 years of construction. And that actually led me to further thoughts of, okay, so what's actually going on here? We have a lot in the pipeline that's not been constructed, and in the past 10 years, we've added hundreds and hundreds of units of housing. So we have housing. We have Queesit, we have Avalon, we have Shovel Shop, all great projects. And in all those projects, there are some vacancies in some of those units. So we have all these units with all these vacancies, not a lot of vacancies, but there are vacancies. And then we have a good amount of stuff in the pipeline. And so then I started thinking, we're above the 10% without this. We have a lot in the pipeline. Our inventory is good right now. And then I thought, this is also actually outside the economic development areas that we've spent millions of dollars trying to develop. Five Corners, Main Street, downtown, and Queesit. We spent millions of dollars putting in infrastructure in there for residential, for mixed use, for commercial, for an assortment of everything. This is sitting so far outside that it doesn't contribute to it. So these are all concerns that I have that I wasn't thinking in the last meeting. I had just learned about it a few days prior, but I'm hesitant on this project, to be very honest, for all those reasons.
Connor, do you want to address any of those points? Or?
Well, as far as the particulars, the vacancy rates are quite low.
Yes.
and as anyone here would attest to, I mean, especially ownership, those things touch the market and evaporate quickly because demand is extraordinarily high in the market. Because I think not only are mortgages at a historic low, I think a lot of people recognize Easton's a wonderful community to live in with a lot of great reasons to live here. So there's certainly, you were correct from a statutory perspective, and we've been clear about this. I've been clear, I hope, in my analysis from the get-go, and so is the developer, to his credit. No one has represented this as a kind of unfriendly, the board must do it. You have no statutory obligation. The town has no statutory obligation to permit a 40B while you're in safe harbor. So yeah, you're correct. We have the board has met that requirement, and you echoed my analysis. So the town has added a good amount of housing to its inventory in the past 10 years. I would note that there are economic development districts that the town is focused on, but the broader housing goals of the town through either Envision Easton as well as the Affordable Housing Trust that this board appoints have not limited or identified and said housing is only a priority in those areas. Yes, right. The Affordable Housing Trust Plan approved by this board specifically notes a goal of creating affordable housing through new construction and to ensure the proportion of subsidized units reaches and remains over 10% moving into the next decade. So that's the goal of the Affordable Housing Trust Board. It's one this board's generally been supportive of. Again, that's not a
still supportive of affordable housing trust. I'm trying to step back and look at the project as a whole. Sure. And I'm not saying like never, but I think there's been so much development in the past 10 years that, and there's so much in the pipeline and we're above the 10% that I kind of feel like I just want to take a breath and, just slow down because it feels like there are a lot of, we have the opportunity to focus on the districts that need it the most. We don't have to accept everything that comes on our table. I don't know. I mean, I've only been part of this board for about a year and a half. I don't know if projects were what's the word I'm looking for, denied or not. We have an opportunity to accept it or not accept it. And at this moment in time, I think we have a lot going on. We have plenty in the pipeline. I'm not against affordable housing or I'm not against growth. I'm not against development. I know that is absolutely essential to survive, not just sustain, but to survive. So I'm not against those things at all. There's a lot in the pipeline that we have. And you add up all of those things in the pipeline, and when they hit within the same 2-year span, it's not 41 additional calls a year for the fire department. It's closer, add them all up.
I just want to be clear. All of those other things that I cited are already in the pipeline and done. So we don't have hundreds of units coming online in the next 2-year span. To be clear, Avalon is 44. This would be 108. I just want to be clear that the hundreds of units we're talking about are already here, built, and incorporated into the town, both from a service impact perspective, but also from a revenue perspective. Avalon pays $900,000 in taxes a year.
Right, but you have the additional 44 at Avalon. Rick Lincoln, right. Your project on Foundry, that's 44 units. I don't know what Ed Walsh will come up with his mixed unit development at Creative Plaza. There's other projects at Five Corners that their goal is to be mixed use. If I add up all those, it's not just 44. It goes over 100 in the pipeline,
yeah,
and not including the 108.
So let me just kind of look at it from a different perspective also. We know that we're just barely above the 10% right now, but we also know that some of the units will be coming off, and some of the units that even though they're permitted won't happen right away. So when we were looking at Avalon, I came on the board shortly after shovel work was approved, I think, or right around the same time, the 244 Washington Street and the Avalon. Everything that comes forward for housing, there's always a pipeline and there's always things on it. It's not like we can stop time to look at that, but some of the things change in the middle. So Queesit, for instance, not everything has been built out according to the way that we thought for the timeline on that. And anything can happen in the middle. Things can change and projects can change scope. Every time somebody builds a house in Easton or builds a new development, that's adding a number to our housing stock that we have to match for affordable housing. I think that we are looking at how to balance housing in the economic development districts and looking at really pacing that as well, because as you build economic development districts, you're also looking at other improved areas for traffic and so forth. So I think it's a very delicate balance, and I agree with how you're looking at this. I think we have to weigh that out and balance it in the big picture. You know, Rick has this property, he can put regular houses on it, and what that does is it just increases the number that we have to reach for affordable housing. Some of the units that are going in on Foundry Street, I don't believe there's an affordable component to that. So again, that's raising the number as well. So I think we do have to consider that, but also keep in mind that we already saw from Wayne Beitler's presentation that in addition to the census changing, there's the potential, you know, that we'll be actually losing some of that housing stock also. So I don't think we're going to be well over the 10% by any means from what we've seen so far.
Connie, I think if I'm understanding Mark, the concern is the impact on services. Is that what you're talking about, Mark, in terms of not having, you know, we're looking at this in a vacuum, but if you add in Korea's Plaza and the housing that Mr. Lincoln's doing on Foundry Street, there's an increased impact for services, both police and fire. Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, it's the increased services on police and fire. It doesn't exist inside the economic, inside the sewer infrastructure. There's no guarantee that it'll be tied into Brockton Sewer. If it doesn't tie into Brockton Sewer, it's going to be septic, and you know that's area. I think there's a swamp across the street, so I think that will impact that area. It's a rural street, and you're going to have 108 cars, delivery vehicles, service people in and out there. It's going to change that road considerably. It's not. I mean that area is not designed for a 108 unit complex. It's just not. You know, you drive down the road, you feel like you're in the hills of New Hampshire. So it wasn't just any one thing, it was the summation of all these different things, because you could look at any one of the concerns I outlined, and you could absolutely take that one and say, this isn't a real, it's not that it's not a real concern, but we could overcome that one concern. In my mind, I'm looking at the summation of all the different concerns that I have, and there's no way they can all be addressed. And the necessity of it is just, we're over the 10%. We have plenty in the pipeline, and we have vacancies in a lot of these places. So I add it all up, and at the end, I come out with, do I support it or not? And when I add it all up, I'm hesitant.
Well, I think that in any rental units, there's going to be vacancies. That's the nature of rentals, and that's how it works, right? So I don't know, unless there was like outrageous amounts of vacancies in one of the places because there's no need for it. Which do you have any information?
Well, could I say something about the vacancy rates in these complexes? In talking with the managers, the vacancy rates are at a desirable level. You always want to have enough open units so that people can continue to rent and move in, and people are always moving out. So what we've been told is that they are at capacity with that cushion that they like to maintain.
Okay.
So I'm trying to like go through and address like each of the issues that you're talking about. But I do agree that they're valid issues, but I think that maybe we could explore them a little bit more in this conversation, because what we're here to do tonight is to vote on whether we want this to move forward through the process. We don't have the end yes or no on things. It will have to go through the process in more details, traffic reports, things like that. I mean, you know that I live on the street where right where Shovel Works is, and my biggest concern was I thought, when it was originally 182 units at the first pass, that's what got me involved in town issues in the first place, is I thought, oh my God, 182 units times 2 cars, maybe 3. They're all going to leave for work at 7 o'clock in the morning. They're all going to drive down Elm Street. I'm never going to get out of my driveway. I, living in the neighborhood firsthand, have never seen a traffic jam from people coming out of Shovelworks. Any of the times I've been at Avalon, I never see cars, even if it's at the peak time, for leaving and coming and going. And we had an analysis done back when we looked at Avalon, and it shows the way the traffic patterns happen. It's hard to believe, because we think in a linear way that everything happens at the same time, but it really does. And I can honestly say, as somebody who lives in the neighborhood of a development with 112 units, the traffic doesn't work that way. But that said, they will do a traffic study on that. So, to double check the numbers in that area as well.
Tony, do you mind if I take a couple moments to share some thoughts?
Sure.
Appreciate it, and thank you for letting me go last so I could get my feet underneath me as I join the call here. I did catch some of it while I was in the waiting room, and I apologize if I repeat anything or ask questions that were covered earlier. I don't think I will. I think it's mostly opinion-based, and I do want to lead with, I believe Mark's comments were very thoughtful, as were the rest of the select boards, and I think they're important aspects to consider as we go forward on behalf of the town. I lean on the other side of advocating for a project of this type with a developer we have worked with, and in a way that affords us the opportunity to control the affordable housing stock in our town, maintaining levels above the 10% on a proactive basis, instead of reacting after the fact if a census change or items drop off. I think we have always been thoughtful regarding that as a town, and I give credit to the select board members that came before me. And I think that this is an opportunity to continue to explore. I somewhat see it as taking a role of stewardship on behalf of our community, and trying to balance all of the factors that I believe Mark raised that were appropriate, especially the stress that it may place on our public services and our ability to continue to provide services to the rest of the residents of the town. But from that perspective, I also look at it as an opportunity for us to control where this type of growth happens, to ensure it doesn't necessarily impact the other aspects of our town where unfriendly 40Bs could go in if we ever were to get to that point. And I also think that it helps support the economic environment in our town. I can certainly appreciate, at least in my mind, I believe there is a connection, and I'll give an example, between Avalon and the ability to sustain that plaza that's out in front of it and create that economic opportunity that exists, and certainly the revenues that come with it. And even still, that plaza is struggling, certainly due to the pandemic. But I believe if we can help our community grow, or our town grow in a smart way, and we have good partners that can help us and assist us to do that, I would be amenable to exploring that. I do think that there are a lot of good questions that we have to ask to ensure we address them in the most effective way for our town. But I have confidence both in our ability as a leadership, team of Easton, including Connor and the rest of the departments that have to participate in this. I do have confidence in the partner that we are discussing this with, and I think that's important as well. And I do agree, my assessment is that Avalon remains relatively occupied in a high degree, otherwise they wouldn't be seeking to build an additional unit up front. That's a sunk cost for an organization of their size that they wouldn't make unless they were highly confident in the ability to gain occupancy. And I think that represents what the attraction of this particular offering and product is for people that can enter into Easton in a relatively affordable way, and that we can have broader more diverse community as a result, and I think that there's a lot of benefits from that. And so I think it's, I look forward to the discussion. I think it's important. I think this is an important discussion for our community. But I happen to think having a little bit of control and understanding who are we having the discussion with is very important versus a potential unfriendly 40B discussion, for example. Those are my takeaways. I think the rest of them were covered in the conversation that were had previously. But I appreciate the moment to catch up and share that.
Thanks, Tom. I guess I just want to add, these are really, really important discussions. And every time we have a new housing house built or a complex built, we do have to put the thought into it. You know, this is what shapes our community. So to take the time to go through all of this, to take the time to look at the reports, to have these questions, they're all great questions. And I think that we do need to look at all of these pieces. And I think that we should absolutely explore these further. So what we're voting on isn't whether to move forward with this, like with the information that we have today. Our role tonight is to vote on whether we want to move this further to explore the rest of that. And I think that those are all questions that we would be looking at in the process of that. So what do you have anything else to add to that, Connor? Or?
I just think it's important to clarify, though, that, and Rick, jump in if I'm wrong, but from a developer's perspective, that he would like to have a general idea of the board's comfort with a project, because if you were to say, okay, proceed, file your project eligibility letter with the state, that sets things in motion that start involving more cost for the developer, more cost for us, frankly, on staff time, doing further analysis. So there will be more analysis throughout the life of any project in permitting. There has been quite significant analysis on the front end so far, and the board, this isn't a lip, so the select board wouldn't be voting for a letter of support, so to speak. So if the board wanted us to advance, it would advance if they would file a project eligibility letter. And this gets into the closing of this analysis, which lays out what those steps would be. If the board feels comfortable with this project proceeding to permitting, the developer would submit what's called a project eligibility application to Mass Housing, which is a state agency. Mass Housing would notify the board and say, hey, this is before us. You have 30 days to return your comments to the state about this project. And it's my recommendation that if we are going to move this forward, although it's not a lip, that the board, before the end of that comment period, the state required comment period, that the board would work out a developer's agreement for mitigations with the developer, basically as your commentary to Mass Housing, to say we support these aspects, that we think there's virtue in this project in these ways, we think there may be some impacts over here, and we worked out an agreement with a developer that satisfies us, and we're supportive. From there, the developer would file a comprehensive permit application, but that application does not go to the select board, it goes to the zoning board. So it, at a certain point, is out of the board's hand, collective hands. ZBA would solicit feedback from town boards and committees, they'd have hearings, and then they'd issue a decision on the permit. I just want to be clear that although there will be additional analysis after, if there are things right now that the board thinks are effectively deal breakers, this is the time to try to address that. I think I'm interested if the developer or his counsel feel differently. But otherwise, it starts turning into sunk costs for everyone involved.
Rick or Walter, do you want to make any comment? Or
I think Connor summarized it pretty well. You know, it's sort of multi-layered. We've hit the first stage, and I've read Connor's memo several times, as I believe Selectman Bodger said. And I agree with the direction of it from our perspective, in that what we would like to see happen is, assuming we get a vote coming out of this evening, is task whoever you guys task to negotiate the development agreement while the mass housing letter is being filed. And in that negotiation, a lot of the big picture items that are at the Board of Selectmen level get negotiated and get dealt with. And then that allows the site eligibility letter to come out of mass housing and the application for the comp permit to get filed with the Board of Appeals, where you get into sort of the fine details of the project, the review, and out of that comes a comprehensive permit, hopefully, that will allow the project to get built. So I think from Rick's perspective, what Connor is proposing in the memo, if the board is willing to pursue it, is exactly what we would like to see happen. You can't deal with all the details at this level right now, right? You gotta take steps. And Mark raises a whole bunch of issues, some are policy issues that we don't have any input on at all, right? They're town Board of Selectmen type policy issues. But a lot of them are detail issues that will get dealt with at the comp permit level. You can highlight and put some trigger points into the developers agreement that highlight those concerns and say, these are things we want you to look at. But some of those get passed on to the Board of Appeals, like traffic. Rick is engaged a traffic consultant already. It's underway. It's part of the initial dollars that get spent on this. But the study won't be finished until much later, and it will be part of the submittal to the Board of Appeals. So I think what's laid out here is a good step towards moving this along if the board inclines.
Thanks, Walter. Rick, did you have anything you wanted to say?
First of all, kudos to everybody involved in that report. I'm assuming Stephanie, Connor, and a few others. In all my years, I've not seen that kind of insight this early in the game, which makes it much easier for me, being this interactive this early. And all of the comments, help me. I've already several phone calls to the landscape architect this afternoon, my architect, traffic engineers, talking about the 1700s house up front. How can we make that work a little better? So it's great to have that kind of input, this early in the game. So for me, most of the concerns are well taken. I don't see anything that's that heavy of a lift. Most of it is really pushing me towards the design, which is what I kind of like to begin with. And the plan was not to put up a vinyl sided building, which is what you see so much of everywhere. So we wanted to do a lot better job on this one, with the concrete siding and so on and so forth. But that's kind of the pretty picture stuff. But this kind of back and forth with you folks is great for me. And it will help, when I go to mass housing, they love that stuff because, there's a whole narrative section on conversations with the town, as you know. And if there is some support, it's helpful.
Terrific. Thank you. Connor?
Rick, could I just ask you to speak a little bit to wastewater treatment, please? From the get-go, you had indicated that you may prefer having sewer. Folks generally do if it's available. But could you speak to what it would look like? Is it possible? Is it doable to have on-site treatment or septic? What would that look like? Is it a deal breaker? Can you just walk the board and I through that?
Sure. Yeah. Good point. Obviously, sewer is preferable because it's just easier and it's quicker. But we don't know how Brockton. The early comments from Brockton were positive. They were willing to meet, but with COVID and Brockton's got several issues in that regard, and You've got some politics involved, so we have not gotten out of the batter's box yet. But we had I think there was a meeting where the mayor of Brockton had agreed to meet, but we just haven't heard anything since. So that's my preference. I think it's the town's preference, obviously. Pre-treatment systems, I've done several because a lot of my developments are in towns where, sewer was not an option. There's a lot of scrutiny involved. There's a lot of subsurface geology, engineering, hydrology, and I've actually I did a good-sized one in East Bridgewater, where DEP actually recommended blacklight, which is a kind of a UV disinfection, they call it, at the end of the effluent, as it enters the leaching field. And I walked down into this foundation. I mean, the water looks like drinking water as it goes into a field. So pre-treatment systems are very effective, and they will last. A leaching field will last a long time if it's designed right, and not overloaded. And the soils out there are very gravelly, and if it's put in the right spot, groundwater is down fairly low. So I don't see much of a problem with a pre-treatment system there if there's some issue with Brockton and the door slams on us over there. So hopefully not.
So, I think that part of the thing that makes these decisions complicated is that you're not freezing time and looking at everything. It's always a moving target, and that's part of the long-term plan that you have to look at, how these things flow out. If it's, approximately $276,000 in taxes versus $11,000 in taxes, those are some of the financial things. If we just froze things and looked at the way things were, like in this point in time, we need to plan for the future, the next 10, 20, 50 years on how that works, and increasing new growth is very important. Without that, we're going to be in big trouble from a tax perspective, to support the town. So incrementally, these projects are important to pace out, and I think that this is a reasonable one to have in this pace, because there's a lot of uncertainty around some of the things that are in the pipeline, from my perspective. So is there still a deal breaker for you in there, Mark, or are you a hard no? Like, what can we talk about more that would be more reassuring?
I mean, I've heard everybody has contributed with really great questions, comments, answers, intelligent, and I think it just comes down to in the past 10 years, there's been so much development. So when you point to we need to keep the pipeline full, it's like, well, the pipeline is full, and in the past 10 years, like, we're at the trajectory to add 1,000 units to this town in 10 years. I'm not against these projects, but at this moment in time, I just feel like we are doing a lot. And I mean, has there been growth in Easton of 1,000 units in the past 10 years? I mean, we've gone decades and centuries without that type of development. And we have 10 years where it's just boom. And there's a lot going on. Five Corners, Queesit, downtown. I think it comes down to a difference of opinion that at this moment in time, I really feel strongly about pumping the brakes.
Okay.
Very respectfully.
Sure.
Is that a hard no, or is that? I mean, I think some of your points you raised are very valid points and legitimate points.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if it went into Shaw's area, or if it went into Queesit or something like that, where it contributed to, Tom, you pointed out that Avalon, Target, and Big Y, and a lot of their patrons are Avalon, and you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. Rick, your other project on Foundry Street, the 44 units of the smaller housing, that's going to contribute to that area phenomenally. I couldn't support it more. That's why I was in support of the additional units at Avalon. This is in the middle of nowhere. I don't see it contributing economically to any area in town. to bring in. I just don't.
Yes, I think that's a good point. The only place I would point out, and it's why I drew the Avalon comparison, was the support for the Roach Brothers Plaza.
Yeah.
And those stores in there. Because to me, that would be a pretty close feeder probably for that. So it would continue to drive economic activity in that plaza. And I know that there's some medical space over there, Duncan. So that was my thought. And I think they're all fair points. I do. I genuinely appreciate the points that you raised. I think it's going to be very important through this process. And anytime we would enter into this, that we felt comfortable that we had the right partner to proceed forward, and that we would do the best by the community. And I think that's
Rick. I do think you're the right partner. I absolutely do. Just for me at this time in that location, I'm a hard no. But it's the majority of the board, so.
Well,
but Rick, I do think you are the right partner. Just it's not this project for me at this time.
I appreciate that.
well, I support moving it forward. I don't know if we have to take a hard vote on it or a consensus, but Craig, what do you think?
Well, number one, I appreciate Mark's comments and his concerns. I think they're very well spoken and valid. I'd like to. I think, as I've heard from Tom and from Chuck, I'd like to move forward with the project from an economic standpoint, from a affordable housing standpoint. I'd like to at least start working the project forward. I assume that we're talking a few years down the road before it actually comes to fruition. But I'd like to start the process.
Well, I don't think it's going to be a few years down the road. When we start the process now, it will move fairly quickly. What would be the timeline that you think, Rick, that once the approvals start? Connor, is that like it's a 30-day for the letter and then another 30 days? We're looking like 6-8 months to get the approvals, or?
I would defer to Stephanie on her experience and opinion, or even Walter has been on both sides of the table as far as getting from this level to the zoning board. And every project's different. I can't speak for the zoning board. But as far as the immediate next steps and the select board's involvement, things would move relatively quickly. If you are supportive of this project, the next step, at least that I would recommend, would be that the board vote to authorize Dottie to work with me and staff and town council to work out a mitigation agreement, a developer's agreement, to bring back to the board for your full execution. But again, the goal there would be to have that wrapped up before that comment period ends. So you assume from here it takes Rick a few weeks. If you give him a nod and it takes him a few weeks to file that project eligibility application, that's 2 to 3 weeks, and then it's a 30-day period. That's 4 weeks, or that's a 6 to 7 week window by which you would be executing a developer's agreement, and this would be moving into the ZBA early in the new year. I can't, Stephanie or Walter, I don't know if you have opinions on the ZBA process. Again, I can't, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to guess how long this one project would take. But as with most of our boards, they try to be, business-like and efficient. So, Stephanie, I mean,
I think if you compare it to the Avalon 2, and again, Walter can hop in because he was chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals at that time, but Avalon 2 moved through rather quickly. We'd done the analysis, we knew what we were getting. It was a much smaller project. I believe it was, I'm going to guess, Walter, it was probably a 4-month process to get from
I can run you through what I see the timeline here, if that's probably the easy way to do it. I would say that, ideally, you could file a site eligibility letter within 2 weeks. Now, we all know that when we say 2 weeks, we mean 3 or 4 weeks because things happen. So let's say 2 to 4 weeks. Mass housing, in my experience recently, and Rick and I have talked about this, is generally taken about 90 days to generate the site eligibility letter. The item that's driving that bus is the 2 items. One is the appraisal, and the second one is oftentimes communities request more time. So 90 days is pretty good because been working with the town so far. Connor's done a lot of legwork. I think we'll work hard to get that developers agreement in place to keep that moving. So, you know, say 2 to 4 weeks to get it filed, 90 days to come out. So you're looking at 4 months. I would say again another 2 to 4 weeks to file the comp permit application. And then from there it's crapshoot. I would say realistically plan on 6 months to get the comp permit. This Board of Appeals, in my experience, and I served with a lot of these guys, certainly the chairman served with me for several years, they're pretty good. They're pretty thoughtful. They're hardworking. They tend to schedule historically for the last 20 years that I served on the board. We tend to schedule special meetings for 40Bs, 2 hours at a time, every 2 or 3 weeks to move them along. But I still think when you're all said and done, to get all of the peer review that's necessary, the traffic, the civil, all that peer review, come out at the backside with a draft decision and assume it's favorable for the sake of this conversation. What this board typically does is they then leave the public hearing open. They share the draft decision that's been drafted by council with the applicant, and then you literally go into a meeting or 2 or 3 and you negotiate term by term, item by item, sentence by sentence, that decision to make sure that it works for both sides. So that takes time. So when I say 6 months, I'm talking about being finished with an actual decision that the applicant says, yes, that works for me. And the board says, yes, that works for me. So from there, you know, you're on to building. There is one step after that. You have to go back to Mass Housing for final approval. That's when the regulatory agreement gets executed and they issue final approval, but that's more pro forma. It does take a little time, maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks, but it's not a heavy lift, and a lot of things occur during that time, like getting ready to file building permit applications, maybe starting some site work. So I think that's probably, unless you know, something slows it down that we can't control, maybe we slow it down a little for negotiation with Brockton, something like that. That's not typical. I think that's probably your time frame.
So if I added that up correctly, it's probably around 12 months.
I think that's right.
And then
you're looking at this time next year.
You have 3 years to build it out on a comprehensive permit, unless you go back and ask for an extension. I guess what flagged me, Craig, when you said years, I just don't want anyone to be under the impression that this is going to not happen for 5 or 6 years. You know,
when I said that, I wasn't talking, I misspoke. I wasn't talking about the process, the permitting process. I was talking the actual completion of the project. That's what I was referring to. So I'm glad that Walter explained the whole process with the Zoning Board of Appeals, because that's something that's new to me. But I was responding more to Mark's concerns and trying to figure out the timing so that there was an opportunity to revisit something as we went along.
Sure. Okay, great. Tom, what are your thoughts?
I'm in support of this. I think it's important that we really pay attention to the details as we move forward. But again, I lean on the strength of the partnership that we have, the effort that Connor and team put forth in this document that was provided, I think is incredibly important. And I think that there's an economic component to this that's important, not just for the businesses that are up and down that area, but also for the tax revenues that it's going to yield. And I see us as gaining yet another, staying a step ahead of the changing census, so to speak, and giving us comfort that we have a little bit of, because of this proactive engagement, that we have the ability to help guide the outcome.
Okay. And Chuck?
Mark had a great point. It's nice to have, in a situation like this, a diversity in point of views, if you will. But the counterpoints of what I read in the memo and what Dottie already expressed is that we really can't count on the 10% as being a done deal for over a certain period of time, because as was pointed out, some of these things might not come to fruition and other things might drop off. So I think when you have a chance to have a developer who has thus so far had a good impact on the town and a good relationship with town boards, I think it's worthwhile to have it move forward. And we've talked about mitigation. I think it will certainly have some economic impact. I'm in favor of it.
Okay. So I really like to get unanimous votes on things, and that we get criticized for that actually. And but the reason that I like that is because to me it means that we've addressed all the concerns that people have brought forward. Mark, since you've indicated that it really is, there's it's a done deal for you, I don't want to press you to move forward with that, but I do want to make a point to acknowledge and thank you for bringing those points forward. It looks like we'll take a vote to move forward. It won't be unanimous. That's okay too. But I just want you to know that your comments and points are not being, we're taking it seriously. We're taking it into consideration. Having the developer here to hear those, I think, is important. And through the process, I think it's important. We'll have opportunities to comment again. So I just, I don't want it to look like, it's anything other than it is. We respect everybody's opinions and the information brought forward and the amount of time that everybody's also spent to be looking into this. So I just want to preface that before I call for the vote. If somebody would like to make a motion to have Connor and I be authorized to enter into mitigation conversations with the developer, I would take a first and a second on that.
So moved. Chuck?
And Broussard?
So Chuck and Broussard, all in favor, going for a roll call vote?
Barger, yes.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, no.
Full Janetti, yes. So 4 yes and 1 no. All right. And do I need to do anything else, Connor, or does that capture it?
I just want to be to cap that off. To say thank you to the board for your thoughtful review of it, and to also make clear for the public and Mark, your feedback is well taken. It'll be on Dottie and I's mind when we're looking at mitigation. That negotiation will bring a final agreement back to the board to vote on.
All right. Thanks for being here tonight, Rick. Thanks for being here tonight, Walter.
Thank you. Good night.
You're getting a tour of Walter's house.
You walking around.
Walter was making a run for it.
Button for another meeting, so I switched over to my phone. I apologize.
Looked like he's exercising.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Night.
Thank you.
So moving on to the next item is a discussion and vote for waste management's curbside solid waste and recycling program fees. David Field and Wendy are going to be here to give us an update on the program fees, and we have information in our packet.
Yeah, so Mike, if when you're ready, if you can move Dave and Wendy into the panel. There's a memo in the board's packet as well as a public packet laying out Wendy's analysis. We do this from time to time as part of our normal stewardship of our enterprise accounts, taking a look at our user fees and our expenses, and obviously do what we can through our contracts with service providers to keep costs as low as we possibly can for as long as we can. But occasionally, oftentimes due to outside market forces, we need to have the board consider a fee increase, which is what we're here for tonight. So I'd ask Wendy and Dave to take it from here and walk through that analysis for the board.
Thank you, Connor. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. So, as you're aware, that the recycling market has changed dramatically in the last 2 years. And we're at the point where we've been monitoring the costs of the trash program, and we're at a point now where, you know, our costs exceed what the fee is that we're currently charging. Just to give you a little background on the program, so the program was first established in 2007. Originally, we set the fee at $65 a quarter, and we kept it at $65 a quarter for 6 years until 2013 or fiscal 14. We increased it to $70 a quarter. Only went up $5 then. And then for another 5.5 years, we were able to keep it at that rate until January 2019. And then at that point, we increased it by $80 per quarter, $10 per quarter to $80. And the reason for that, you know, had to do with the big changes that occurred in the recycling market. During the time from inception, the program has grown steadily from 2,700 to about just under 4,300 subscribers. One thing to note too is that our program offers weekly curbside solid waste and recycling collection. You know, a lot of other vendors offer recycling every other week. We are weekly, and we offer bulk item collection for 6 times a year. And if subscribers also need an additional trash barrel or recycling barrel, they can also get those at an additional fee of $22.50 per quarter. So back in 2018, China, which took a lot of recycling, most of our country's recycling, they placed a ban on the import of many of those recycling commodities. This goes back to around January, beginning of 2018, which resulted in us paying a premium on the disposal of recyclable materials. Prior to that, it had been less expensive to dispose of all the recyclable material. So the rate increase became necessary to maintain services in fiscal year 2019, and so effective January 1st, 2019, we increased the fees to accommodate those additional costs. However, those costs continue to rise, and as a result, we do need to see another fee increase this fiscal year, preferably in January. Just wanted to give you a breakdown of the quarterly costs. So if you look at the last time we increased the fees, so we increased to $80 that last quarter of fiscal in fiscal 20. The amount was about $80. So most of that is trash, but a good part of it is recycling. And if you look at the end of this past fiscal year, that last particular quarter, because every quarter the amounts change based on a combination of things, enrollment, particular rates for recycling that quarter. But at the end of fiscal 20, that quarterly rate went up to about $88. So that's really where the difference is, and as you can see, most of that is related to recycling. This is just another analysis in looking at the quarterly costs. So if you look at the 2 lines, the fee, what we charge, is in green, and the actual costs are in yellow. And you can see, there's not a huge difference between the rates until you get to around when China placed the ban and the fees went up. So then we had the last fee increase in January of 2019, and there, your costs and your revenues are roughly equal, but the costs then continue to rise. And so that's why we're at this point now where we need to, consider another fee increase. So, in the end, my recommendation would be that we increase the quarterly fee from $80 to $90 a quarter, effective January 1st, 2021. And then the additional fees that we charge for the extra carts, recycling and trash, just stay the same at $22.50 per barrel. And we did do some pricing, and this is still really good value for the money. I mean, it's $1 a day, and it's very competitive and less than other vendors that offer this service in town.
Dave, can you, if you're there, I don't know if you have it, can you identify, we don't need to get into vendor names, so there are some private competitors to this, and in addition to us trying to just go for general price stability for the benefit of the public, as Wendy noted, we never like to increase fees, but even with an increase, this would still be substantially cheaper than some private competitors. Do you have some numbers there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have those offhand, Connor. I don't have that with me, but I believe I sent that to you earlier. I think it's in the area of $30 to $40 more expensive per quarter for other waste haulers over the town.
Thank you.
Yeah, the price we got was $140.99 for comparable size barrels, but recycling would still be every other week and not every week like we currently offer.
I think, Dave, remind me, but before the change in Chinese policy towards recycling actually used to be a financial benefit to these.
That's correct. So
we used to encourage, and we expanded that opportunity for folks, not only because folks wanted it from an environmental perspective, but it actually was really good economically. And after that international policy change, it's just getting a complete inversion, and again, just costing an arm and a leg, right?
That's correct. The goal before China soared was to try to have as many people recycle as much as possible, because we'd avoid the tipping fees for trash, which was in this $78 to $80 range per ton, where we could split revenues with waste management on the commodity price of recycling, and we could recover most of those costs for recycling and not have to pay for the solid waste. Now that's kind of been flipped on its head, and we're actually paying more for recycling than we are for trash.
All right, any comments or questions from the board? Craig? You're on mute.
I think that Wendy and David and Connor have done a good job in laying it out. Particularly, I have the memo in front of me that Dave put together regarding the $140.99. That's substantially more expensive than what we're currently charging people, and we get it recycling every week as opposed to every other week under that $141 fee. So I appreciate the analysis, and I'm supportive of the increase because it's necessary.
Tom?
The only thing I would point out is I think from Dave's comments that one might infer, then why do recycling if it's cheaper to just treat it all as trash? But I do think it's an important statement for us as a community to do recycling and to try to help the environment in any way, shape, or form. I'm hopeful that that market dynamic changes and that hopefully we can gain more efficiencies in recycling. And I think Easton is very committed to recycling. So from my perspective, I would recommend the proposed fee increase, preserve a strong recycling culture. And I still think to Select Board Member Barcher's comments, it's still more affordable. I can speak personally and say that I've never had a bad issue regarding the service of my trash through Waste Management. I have them, and they've always done just a fantastic job. So,
Chuck?
I'm in favor of it as well. There is still a substantial benefit in cost. There are other benefits that Waste Management offers, such as recyclables every week, which some other companies do not. And I would say that there are probably several good companies. I have no reason to say any of the other companies are not good companies. But as a customer of Waste Management, I can say that they've done a good service for me.
Terrific. And Mark?
I'm in favor of it for all the reasons mentioned. Everything was covered.
I just have one question. Are they still going to allow the textile recycling?
Yes,
Is that part of it?
the
It's a
textile
separate-
recycling is still going on. We haven't had a lot of participation, and with COVID, they did suspend it for a time being. So if you do put something out, we encourage you to call the number for the pickup. But you know, that's not a problem. They are in town and they're still picking up our textiles.
Okay.
Who is?
And all,
It's so we've contracted with a vendor called Simple Recycling, and they're a textile recycling vendor. So there's pink bags that all the waste management customers received initially, and as you use the pink bags, they'll replenish those. You can put out basically textiles, household goods, and they'll be recycled curbside on your regular collection day.
And textiles, for example, are like old shirts or old clothing that you might have.
Correct. Even shoes, even down to household goods like spatulas and bowls and things like that. They'll take a variety of those items. They're all listed on the bags.
Okay.
and then there's also bulky item pickup. So that's always a big interest to the community when it's around that time, and a lot of questions about what do they pick up, and we point people to the website. So that just to add that in, that's another added value. I think the best thing we can do about recycling is look at the way that we use plastics and try to not use single-use plastics. So I know that that's something that Green Communities has been advocating for, and I think is really important. I know that I try to make my lunch and bring it in a glass container now instead of plastic, so every little bit helps. But with that, if somebody would like to make a motion to accept the fee increase as proposed.
So moved, Barger.
Second, Broussard.
That's Barger Broussard with a roll call vote.
Barger, yes.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Full Janetti, yes. Thanks so much, Wendy and David, for being here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you both.
Appreciate it. All right. And next, we have the review of the November 30th, 2020 draft town meeting warrant.
Sure. So, Dottie, if you and the board are amenable, I would recommend for Stephanie and Greg Strange's sake, because Greg has been patiently here, if we moved Articles 15 through 19 up for his and Stephanie's presentation, and then we could get back to the other items that I'm hanging around anyway.
Of course, I appreciate you making that recommendation. So if nobody on the board objects to that, we'll move those up. Okay. So we're starting at Article 15.
Yes. Well, actually, 14 is planning. Is from the planning department. So, and that's very quick. So, Stephanie, if you could start us with 14, the street acceptance. And,
yes, this is basically a housekeeping item at this point. This would have gone on the warrant for May if it hadn't been for the COVID restrictions on the town meeting. As actually, I think Dottie's probably the only member of the board that has been through a street acceptance in the past. But once a road that is built as part of a subdivision where the road is intended to be accepted by the town and maintained by the town going forward, once it's complete, and you know, we've reviewed it in the planning department, and the DPW has looked at it and agrees that it is constructed as it was intended to be, and it's in repair. The developer requests that be accepted by the town. And that is the case with Silver Drive. It was a new, smaller subdivision as part of the Rockland Bay subdivision, which is off Rockland Street and Bay Road.
Terrific. Anybody on the board have any questions? Nope. Okay, would somebody like to make a motion to include and recommend?
Moved, Barger.
Second,
Broussard.
That was a conflict. I heard Chuck speak first as the second, so is that all right, Tom?
Oh, of course. I would always defer to Mr. King.
So that's Bodger and King, and a roll call vote. Craig?
Barger, yes.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes?
Lamb, yes.
Full Janetti, yes. Thank you. Okay, on to Article 15 for our zoning amendment, appending the table of use regulations.
Stephanie, to be clear, the planning board opened a hearing about this, but the planning board has not finalized it, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And Greg is actually going to talk to each of the proposed amendments, and he'll explain, at this point, I think it's fair to say, and Greg, you can jump in, that the board, there was just one of the zoning amendments that they were going to go back and provide some clarity to, and continued to their next meeting, which is next Monday.
That's correct. Good evening, all. Yeah, Article 16 is the one that I'll talk about when we get to that. Very succinctly, briefly, Article 15, the Queeset Commercial District, when we formed those 3 sub-districts 8 years ago, for various reasons, basically a laundromat was not allowed in sub-district A, which is sort of where CVS is, starts at CVS and goes down to where Papagino's is. There's a strip mall on the corner of Belmont and Washington that would like to have a laundromat, and given the proximity to Stonehill, the benefit to the sewer district and the benefit to the town for the fee, we all agreed it would be best to allow a laundromat in sub-district A, hence the Article 15.
Anyone have any comments or questions from the board?
Greg, can you clarify where exactly is this proposal?
So, well, the sub-district, without sharing my screen, so sub-district A, think of 138 where it intersects with 123. The strip plaza that has the Honeydew Donuts in it is the northernmost point. Across the street, then you have the CVS, then you move down, there's a couple older buildings. There's that giant Gambrel house that seems abandoned. Down to the corner of Central Street, and across the street you would have the subject property that brought this up was the one on the corner. I think, was it a store, 24 or 7-Eleven that was there? And
yeah, it was a 7-Eleven.
The dry cleaner now. And then there used to be the gas station there for many years. And it goes down, picks up the Easton Marketplace, and goes all the way down to the entrance of the industrial park, where the Plymouth Crossing strip plaza is.
The actual location is at where Trucci's used to be, or?
Well, the actual location. 24 or 7-Eleven, forget. Right on the corner of Belmont and Washington. But it would be allowed in any parts of that district that I tried to give the outline of.
Any other questions? Would anyone like to make a motion to include and recommend?
So moved. King?
Second, Broussard.
That's King and Broussard, and roll call vote.
Barger, yes.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes?
Lamb, yes.
Full Janetti, yes. Okay, on to Article 16, zoning
Okay, so
amendment.
16, so like I said, this is the only one. This one sort of fell victim to our little run of planning directors this year, and we knew we needed a little work on it, and with Stephanie back, we finally started working on it, but we just needed one more meeting. This involved looking to allow mixed use in the Village Business District. For those, just as a reminder, the Village Business District is a small section, or the majority of the what we would call historic downtown Northeastern. It would be everything on Main Street from the 68 Main Street, the old post office, where the engineering company is, basically to the left of Sundells, excludes Sundells, and goes all the way down to both sides of Mechanic Street, and is mirrored on the other side of the street and picks up the first couple of properties on Center Street as well. Oxford Cleaners, the building that Mr. Howe took down a few years ago, and then across the street, the paint, rust and pixie dust, and I think it's a yoga studio to the left. We currently, as you look at written in the article, it allows for up to 4 units for every 2,500 square feet. And that is lot size of 2,500 square feet. It's probably a little higher than we intended. And we have just wrapped up a comprehensive study of existing units and existing lot sizes, and we'll be we'll be fine tuning this, and I'm confident voting in favor, but with a slightly different number at our next meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions about this? So I would suggest a motion to recommend. A motion to include, but not make a recommendation on it just yet, and we can bring this back for a future vote to decide whether we recommend or not.
I'll move Barger.
I'll second Broussard.
So Barger, Broussard, and that's a motion to include. And a roll call vote?
Barger, yes.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Full Janetti, yes. Excellent, thank you. Article 17.
All right, so this is the big one. This is really what we've been working on. This is the creation of the Furnace Village District. And Stephanie, I can either share the screen. I thought it might benefit us to have the zoning map up.
Yeah, I have it up.
Okay, if you could just pop that up. So this through.
Okay, so I'm assuming. I just want to check. Can everyone see the map that shows the district?
Yes.
Yes, but can you give us a little bit of context at what we're looking at?
Well, Greg is going to do that. I just wanted to make sure that that's what you were looking at and not some other activity on my screen.
So the just for we can dig more into the map, but just to give you an idea, the areas in red, I can't use. Doesn't make sense if I point, but the areas in red, that is running left to right is Route 106, and where the areas in red are Big Y, Avalon, that Highland Plaza. Then you go down, you see New Pond and Old Pond. In the yellow area, the yellow shaded area represents what we're calling the residential transition district. Those small blue properties in the middle, that's where Paquontaket intersects or meets up with Route 106. Blue is the business district. Think of the old Keach law offices, pre-existing business district that we're keeping. And then the salmon color is sort of the traditional 5 corners. And the big piece right where the icon, right where the hand is, that's Shaw's Plaza, just for a little you are here kind of feel. So we have been working, planning board and many members in town, we've been working on this solid for a year, really, probably 24 months. Goes back to the master plan, ties into all sorts of visioning sessions, neighborhood meetings, private one-on-one meetings with stakeholders, and property owners, potential property owners. And goes back to what you've heard me talk about many times, creating walkable downtowns in Easton. We've always felt we had 3 of them. One, the old Village Business District, then the 138 area, Queesa Commercial District, and Furnace Village. So tying in, following up on sewer coming down here, tying into the diff, everything that Connor and Stephanie had worked on last year. We thought, okay, how can we best revitalize this area, bring in economic development, create walkable neighborhoods, create diversified housing. Part of that, Rick Lincoln was with you earlier, and we've been working with Rick, I don't know, Stephanie, 3 years maybe, to get our first, at the old foundry, our first compact neighborhood. So anyway, so that's just kind of a backdrop. So we're looking to create 4 sub-districts. The bright red, as you can see, we're calling the Eastman, what was the final version name of this? Eastman Street sub-district, catchy. The salmon on the opposite end is the Depot Street sub-district. The yellow is the residential transition district, and then blue, like I said, we're calling the Furnace Village business district. long story short, without reading a bunch of boring zoning, in the sub-districts that bookend this, we're looking to bring in creative ways to allow both mixed use and or multifamily uses through special permits, highlighting design guidelines, street beautification, street calming, with an eye towards, in the future, a redesign of this portion of 106 and 123 with sidewalks and green spaces and accessibility to a lot of Easton's green emerald necklace that's here. There's 29,000 cars a day we know go through here, and it's not because of any growth in Easton that the traffic's there. As we know, looking at traffic studies, it's amazing how many people come off of 495 and come over to 24. As part of Rick Lincoln's project, we'll be adding a light, which will really help at Pequantucket and Foundry, and that will help quite a bit with traffic. And so mixed use, real flexibility. As we know, bricks and mortar has been changing, so there's quite a bit of flexibility in the bylaw through the special permit process to try to be creative and come up with some innovative ways for land use. The yellow, there was a lot of input from the residents in the Foundry, South Street, Pequantucket area, not to, at first we offered them lots of these tools. They really didn't want that. We were able to do a couple creative things. There's some smaller lot opportunities in there where you could see potentially maybe 7 or 8 new homes could be added in that area. If the homeowners so choose, so we're trying to add to their property value there. And then there's a really unique program where there's some really tremendous, fantastic historic properties there. And if folks, working in conjunction with the historical commission, can get a density bonus for residential units, be they rental, be it condo, be it standalone, you could even do it that way, to both save and enhance the historical nature of the property. And then, as I touched on earlier, the blue, which is if you think of, there's a used car brokership there, and then there's the old brick building, which I refer to as the Keach Law Building, which my friends on historical would throw rocks at me for not recalling the exact name of it right now. But there's four properties there that are sort of, they are pre-existing. And again, we spoke with the owners and they just wanted to kind of keep it that way. So anyways, in a quick synopsis, that's it in a nutshell.
Any comments or questions from the board?
I would just say thank you for the effort. I think it takes a tremendous amount of engagement for the community. It takes a tremendous amount of foresight to package these items and to envision a whole different experience for that corridor. I think is important and can take advantage of all the assets that are there. So I just want to express my appreciation.
Great. Would anybody like to make a motion to include and recommend Article 17?
So moved, King.
Second, Broussard.
King, Broussard, and a roll call vote. Craig, starting with you.
Barger, yes.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes.
Yes.
Full Janetti, yes. Thank you. On to Article 18.
So 18 and 19, I guess I'll kind of omnibus them, if that's the proper term. These are, in the last few years, with all of the different types of zoning that we've done, the bylaw was kind of getting footnote crazy, and the tables, we're trying to make it a little more user-friendly. So 18 is just a reorganization, if you will, of the table of uses. It takes what was one that was really becoming cumbersome and breaks it down into a few, even though it doesn't look that way when you look at it in 19 pages, but trust me, it's easier to use. and then the same thing on 19 is the same, just that has to do with the dimensional and density regulations.
I'm just showing the table of uses to give you an idea. Before, you would have had all the different zones across the top, and if you added the two special districts, the village, the Furnace Village District, the Village Business District, and the Queesa Commercial District, this would have been the equivalent of an 8.5 by 14 sheet. And as Greg pointed out, it would be very difficult to read, and especially within the town code.
Could I ask Greg, this is basically, it's housekeeping. The substantive changes to the bylaw at the November 30th town meeting are items 15, 16, and 17, and 18 and 19 is just making some tables actually legible, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Well, Greg, if I could also add, what it does do is it identifies and it documents the allowed uses within the Furnace Village District as well.
Which can port back to the zoning change, right?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion to include and recommend Articles 18 and 19?
So moved, King?
Second, Broussard.
King and Broussard, and a roll call vote starting with you, Craig.
Audrey, yes.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Full Janetti, yes. Thank you very much, Stephanie and Greg. We really do appreciate all the work that you have done together with your team on the planning board, and we're very lucky to have such smart people taking care of these issues.
Well, Greg gets all the credit for this one. I happened to take a little hiatus right in the middle of all the work being done and came back at the end to help move this forward. So Greg really gets all the credit.
Thank you.
Can I just ask Greg that when we come to town meeting that you take the time to really explain it for those of us who are not clearly as astute in this area as you are?
Absolutely. I'll do it nice and pithy, but you guys just went through a long sort of zoning meeting, and I didn't want to do it to you again. So. And we appreciate all the work you guys do. So keep it up.
We can make a YouTube of you, Greg, just talking about the the table of use.
Johnny, see, even when I keep it short, I get in trouble. So.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Good night, all. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, going back to Article 4. Did we already make a motion to include this, and we're just looking for a recommendation, or did we not do anything?
No, I don't think you did. Let me go and double check your agenda from last time. You did not do anything with Article 4, 5, or 6. So these are all new for tonight. Sorry, just let me pull my packet back up. So I provided the board with copies of what Wendy and I presented to the Finance Committee last Wednesday, because they provide some context to the conversations that we'll be having relating to all of our budgetary articles at town meeting in November. So for tonight's purposes, I'm not asking for recommendations yet on Article 4, 5, or 5. I'll ask you to include them, but I figured I may as well give you and the public, as I did at Finance Committee, just a look at what we're basing our decisions off of. I anticipate that at your next meeting, November 2nd, which is your last meeting before you sign the warrant, I'll have a budget change memo that quantifies everything much more specifically, as well as a special time capital budget memo as we traditionally do in the fall. So I'd ask the board just to take a look at the June reports from the Finance Department that we sent to Finance Committee last week. The short version is good news that we finished fiscal year 20 in the black, and we're estimating our free cash around 1.6 million, which, given the economic circumstances, is I'll speak for myself, a lot better than I thought we would have, and is obviously welcome news. It's still less than last year and is continuing the trend of tightening free cash, but it's a good thing in context. That is almost entirely driven by expense turnbacks. If you look, we met our revenue forecast by 43 grand, which out of 82 million and change is cutting it much closer than we'd like to and than we typically do. And a lot of that you'll see is driven by a bit of a shortfall in property tax collections, some of which may be due to later payments that the board allowed, and also just a higher rate of folks not making those payments, period, due to economic hardship. But not so much so that it caused us to go into the red on our revenue. So our revenues came in marginally over expectation, but on the expense side, for a variety of reasons. One is just the general kind of shutdown in the spring was so severe that some spending organically let up. But also on the town side and the school side, we issued spending and hiring freezes early in this crisis to try to put limits on as much spending as humanly possible. And so we had multiple six-figure turnbacks from town departments, from the school department, and we also had a $600,000+ turnback from employee benefits and insurance, which we always try to budget conservatively on. And we also run those incentive programs to have folks jump onto more cost-effective plans. So of that 1.62 million in free cash, 1.58 million of that is from dollars we didn't spend. So, so that's some good news. There's no action you need to take on any of that. I just wanted to share that with the board. It is at least tangentially related to the stabilization articles, our reserve strategy, as well as some availability of funding for capital. So before I get into the particulars of Article 4 or 5, does anyone have any questions or feedback on that? Okay, great. So Article 4 is still in draft form, so I'm just going to ask for you to vote to include it tonight. I plan to amend certain town department budgets at town meeting on November 30th. Most significantly, at least for now, what my intention is to reallocate funds within departments based on the increased savings that we will see from SEMREC. Now that that's getting close to being realized, the building project should be done in a matter of weeks, and we will be fully regional in December. Thankfully, we are looking that we'll be saving more in dispatching costs than what we had thought. Partially due to the dark station staff model with the police officers. So I would be looking to move some funds into other town departments from that increased savings, which would still be within the budget that was adopted. It just, because of the way our budget is structured, we need town meeting to vote if we're gonna move from Department A to B on the town side. Other changes outside of that may occur, depending on what, if anything, we learn from the Commonwealth. Some, again, good news, which we haven't had a lot of economically. Governor Baker issued his revision to the fiscal 21 budget. So we're in month 4 of fiscal 21. The state still does not have a budget for this fiscal year. Governor Baker issued a revision for the first time in 9 months last week that includes level funding for state aid, which is a huge improvement from what we and most of our colleagues in the municipal industry expected. Obviously, that still needs to go through the legislative process and be signed into law, but the governor has made his commitment clear, for which I'm very thankful, and I'm sure the board echoes that. Because the governor and our lawmakers in our delegation are very sensitive to reality that so much of the response to coronavirus and so much of the services that are so important during this are delivered on the municipal governmental level. So while it continues to be deeply disappointing that there's no meaningful movement on the federal level to support us, the governor has done a really good thing there, and I hope and trust our lawmakers will as well. So if that comes to be, the governor has set an ambitious timeline that they want a budget signed before Thanksgiving. If they meet that, that means we'll be going into special town meeting November 30th with a adopted budget from the state, which would be very helpful because that's $1 million in revenue that we planned on not having. That will inform decisions probably about the stabilization fund article, how much we want to rebuild that, because from my perspective at least, that's a top priority, because we did hit that significantly in the spring to the tune of $500,000 to offset the anticipated $1 million lost from the state. And other than that, we'll need to just look at the numbers and communicate with Dr. Cabral on the school side and see what the most pressing needs are. But on the town side, at least, even though this is welcome news, it would not be my intention to at least in any really aggressive way allocate that revenue towards continued recurring costs. My priority would be the stabilization fund, because we expect, while this is good news, we know from history these things take a long time to get through. And in the 2008 recession, it actually took a year. It was not immediately that the state budget was very difficult for cities and towns. It was the year after. So we want to continue to be very conservative and protective of our reserves and cautious in our budgeting. But I figured you've gotten almost universally bad news as a leadership team on the finance front. So I'm happy to give some measured good news. In a normal year, getting a 0% on state aid would not be celebrated. Obviously, this is not a normal year, so that is a kind of huge success if the governor and legislature adopt that. So that will have some impact on Article 4. So I know I got a little in the weeds there. I will have a budget memo with the particulars of what I intend to do at your next meeting, where I'll ask for your recommendation. But for now, if you don't have any questions about any of that, I would just ask for a vote to include Article 4.
Any questions from the board?
I do not.
Okay, I'll take a motion to include Article 4.
So moved, Barger.
Second, Broussard.
Barger, Broussard, and roll call vote, Craig.
Barger, yes.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Full Janetti, yes. Excellent. Article 5, the supplemental fiscal 2021 capital budget.
Same timeline. I'll have a memo for the board at your November 2nd meeting that quantifies the specific items. As you know, we only funded absolute emergency items in the spring because we had no idea what free cash would look like, what the state budget would look like. So we'll have a little bit of a better idea, as I just talked about, going into the fall. We're still going to be conservative. This will not be a rich capital budget, but there are certain capital priorities from my perspective and the capital committee's perspective that we don't want to fall behind on, like police cruisers as one example, or computers, perhaps certain school capital items as well, that Wendy and I will work together to bring a memo forward. So for now, I would just ask for a vote to include, and the particulars will be final in 2 weeks.
Any questions from the board? Would somebody like to make a motion to include Article 5?
So moved, Barger.
Second, Broussard.
Barger, Broussard, you start, Craig?
Barger, yes.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Full Janetti, yes. Article 6, rescinding previously authorized debt.
This is housekeeping. This is previously authorized debt from 12 years ago that is no longer needed as a new elementary school is going to be constructed, and this will just get that authorization off our books.
Terrific. Somebody like to
Does
make
it
a motion
include
to...
and recommend?
Yes, please.
Include and recommend?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Article
Daddy.
6. Would someone like to make a motion to include and recommend Article 6?
So moved, Barger.
Second, Broussard.
Barger, Broussard, back to you, Craig.
Barger, yes.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Full Janetti, yes. Article 12, CPA funding for the town hall restoration.
That's a mistake on my part. It should not have been on the agenda. You already voted on this.
Yeah, I was starting to feel like I was losing it because I could have sworn that we voted on it.
No,
that makes me feel better. And
easy.
then Article 13 for
All
the
right,
amendment to the sewer district map.
Yes, so Article 13 is in your packet. I also included a supplemental memo and a map just to aid in the conversation. This article would amend the Five Corners Sewer District to add one additional parcel to it. That parcel, which is 20 South Street, currently is bordered on two sides, the south and west side, by the sewer district, and the frontage of this property touches the road that a sewer pipe is now in. But it wasn't in the map that was voted 10 years ago. And so technically, although the board has a privilege fee policy where you allow folks to connect to existing sewer or expand their use and pay a comparable fee to a betterment for equity's sake, this piece of land that touches the sewer district and is feet away from a sewer pipe can't connect to the sewer unless it gets added to the map. You know, in Northeaston and in Queesit, those sewer projects are actually much smaller than the needs area on the map that they are in. Five Corners is unique that was a much larger project, and the sewer is available at every parcel in the map. So in Northeastern, the town meeting wouldn't need to vote on something like this. And in fact, the board has voted privilege fees in other districts because there are properties that weren't connected to the public sewer, but they're on the map, so to speak. This property just happens to be the first one not on the map. The person who owns it is looking to develop it. It is a large parcel, I think 16 acres of land roughly, and they would be looking to do 20 single-family homes, which they can do under the current zoning. So Greg Strange, playing chair, just was talking about zoning changes at Five Corners. Has nothing to do with this parcel. This parcel's not in that article. This parcel's not in the zoning change, and this article doesn't change the zoning. So the existing zoning for this piece of land would allow someone to get a special permit and build 20 homes. They would just use septic tanks. And as we just discussed with another developer, generally, if sewer's available, people nearly always prefer that. It's a better wastewater solution. So this would just add this piece of land to this map and allow it to tie into the sewer. If it's not added to the map, the development can still happen exactly as it's proposed. It would just use a worse wastewater treatment product, and we would get no revenue from a sewer system, and we would not get a privilege fee to offset some of the debt.
Any questions from the board? Okay, I take a motion to include and recommend Article 13.
Barger.
Can you say that again, Craig?
So moved, Barger.
Okay. And Tom?
Second.
So that's Barger, Broussard. Back to you, Craig.
Barger, yes.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes.
Yes.
Full Janetti, yes. Okay, so that takes care of all the warrant articles that we have on the agenda tonight. Next is the standing update for the COVID-19 response. Connor?
Sure. Board can see my screen all right?
Yes.
Great. I'll try to be quick. So as is our practice at each meeting, I give the board just an update of the data that Easton Emergency Management is looking at, the trends nationally, regionally, and locally that inform decisions we are making, as well as decisions the governor is making, and try and note any pertinent changes or updates for the community. So as of today, the United States still the epicenter of the pandemic. We're at just about 8.2 million cases, nearing 220,000 dead. The daily case 7-day moving average is increasing once again into the high 50,000s per day, and the percent positive is slowly creeping up again. This graph, I don't know where the Brady Bunch box is floating, so I don't know if it's covering the graph, but if you look at it, we are after a high peak in July of a rolling 7-day average. I was in the mid 60,000 per day. We're steadily improving as we headed into fall, and around Labor Day, the United States is back down under 40,000 cases a day on average, which is not great, but obviously much better than we were in the summer. And now we are trending, as you can notice, back up in the opposite direction once again as we head into the colder months. Specifically, that rolling average in September was in the mid 30,000s a day, and now we're nearing 60,000 a day. And on Friday last week, there was more than 70,000 cases in the United States, which is the most we've had in a single day since July. This is the COVID exit strategy map. Governor Baker's travel policy is in part based off of this map, which sources publicly available COVID data from the CDC and other sources, and it's color-coded for the percent positive rate of coronavirus. So that's the amount of tests. If you have 100 tests coming back, how many of those are positive? And the Northeast has been thankfully doing better in that regard than our neighbors around the United States. In this map, I had to do a double take. I don't know. I don't have 2 weeks ago's map, but this is significantly worse than 2 weeks ago. This is a much darker red in the United States. I'm sure you see the inescapable and deafening volume of news about coronavirus, like we all do, and the cases are moving up in a lot of the United States. As far as Massachusetts, we are at about 143,000 cases. We're 9,700 folks in the state have lost their lives. The average daily incidence rate per 100,000, that's a measurement category that the DPH and governor use for setting their green, yellow, and red standard for communities on that map. And in Massachusetts, in the past 2 weeks, if the state of Massachusetts was a town, it would be red. Because it's over 8 cases per 100,000 population. The percent positive rate's just over 1%, which is significantly better than most of the country. Daily cases in Massachusetts have begun to trend upward a little bit, not as pronounced as the United States overall, thankfully. Since the beginning of this month, it's the 19th, 10 days, we've seen more than 600 cases per day. About an hour ago, as our meeting was starting, the numbers came out. We had more than 800 cases confirmed in Massachusetts today. That's the most we've had since the summer in a single day. We're obviously testing significantly more now, but that is still meaningful and a reminder that we need to continue to be vigilant and do the right things, even though, frankly, I know we're all probably exhausted of those things like social distance and mask wearing. The governor's travel order is still in effect. That's available at mass.gov/travel. Nothing particularly new there. So this is the weekly DPH map that gets put out. They rank communities. Gray is very marginal spread, green, yellow, and red in increasing intensity of spread. And Easton right now is a little island of green, surrounded by a lot of yellow and red. When the first one of these maps was issued at the end of August, I think 5 communities were red, and now we're in the 60s to 70s. Again, I'm not saying that to be alarming in any way. I'm just kind of noting the trend. But Easton is in the lower risk category, at least as of last Wednesday. Our cumulative cases are at 365. It's an increase of 15 since your last meeting. And I have not requested an updated number of fatalities as the office that would process that is currently administering early voting. This is the biweekly case count. So this is a kind of, most data portals have at this point moved to kind of a rolling average reporting figure, so you get a good idea of a visual representation of the intensity of spread within a community based on how much it's occurring over a fixed period of time. This is just a line graph that takes the data that's coming from those weekly DPH reports. Obviously, like most of the Northeast, we had a spike in how many cases we were getting every couple of weeks back in April and May, and thankfully that's dropped quite a bit. And we're kind of hovering around the teens every 10 to 20 cases every 2 weeks now. This is just the actual numerical data here. It's color coded. So 4 weeks since mid-August, we've been in the yellow category. We are typically in green. We are in the green category right now. And hopefully stay generally in those areas. Our test positive rate is quite low. It's 0.23%. That's significantly lower than the United States, which is over 6%, and it's still quite meaningfully lower than the Massachusetts average. Our average daily incidence rate is also lower than the Massachusetts average. As has been the case, there's no particular one facility or one location that's driving growth. It's just a reality of a contagious virus that there continues to be general community spread. And again, that's not a term used to sound alarming. That is true of nearly all of the United States. Our numbers in a lot of regards are looking comparatively positive compared to some of our neighbors. So our average daily incidence rate and the test positive rate in Easton are lower and therefore better than the state as a whole. Municipal side, we still are offering remote services during all normal hours. We have appointments available for folks who need them. And all of our information is still at easton.ma.us/COVID-19. Town office is quite busy right now and will be through November 3rd. Early voting is being run out of the town offices. That began on Saturday. There's been a ton of interest from voters. Lots of mail ballots already returned to the ballot drop box at the town offices, and also a lot of voters showing up for in-person voting, for early voting at the town offices, which is great. I'm not going to go into all the detail I did last time, but voting by mail is obviously still an option. If folks have their ballots and you're going to make a decision, we recommend you do so and return that shortly. If you're concerned about postal service delays, we have a secure ballot drop box that looks like a giant U.S. flag at the town offices. It's safe. It's checked every day, and you can drop your ballots right there, safe and easily. Early voting, again, started Saturday the 17th, and it will be 7 days a week through Friday the 30th. So 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays, including next weekend. And Monday through Friday, it's our regular office hours. So tonight, early voting probably just wrapped up at 7:30. Tuesday through Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And Friday, 8:30 to 12:30. We have staff on hand. Town clerk's done a great job with rolling out health measures, virus guards, masks, all that stuff to help people feel comfortable. So that's ongoing. All of our voter information is at easton.ma.us/vote. And then, of course, the presidential election will be November 3rd. Oliver Ames High School standard polling location from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., 13-hour day. Folks can vote in person there as well. Recommend you check out your precinct. If you know your precinct when you get there, that's always helpful. And, of course, wear a mask. Other general services, Board of Health, the Department of Health and Community Services and the schools published a handbook for school administration decision-making on COVID-related matters that's available on the school website. Department of Health and Community Services and schools speak every single day to maintain good and open communication. This week, the Department of Health and Community Services launched an intern program to supplement their contact tracing and communication capabilities, which is good. That's just, it will give some extra sets of eyes and hands to help out with us as we head into the winter. And Public Safety and Works remain fully operational. And today, the Board of Health put out some cute little tips for folks. The board, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you were getting asked by some folks about Halloween guidance. The board isn't evoking some type of curfew or anything. They're trying to go the educational route and share with folks basically a lot of consolidate and make available a lot of resources that have already been shared by other public health authorities. So, for example, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention put out some really helpful guidance for folks to make good choices for themselves and their families, not just for Halloween, but for all of the upcoming fall holidays, Thanksgiving, etc. So folks can try to, safely or more safely celebrate the holidays while trying to do their part to keep themselves and their community healthy. So that's available online. It's on our social media. It's on the town's website, and we'll continue sharing these materials through press releases and other things as we approach Halloween. So other than that, I don't have anything else. I'm happy to take any questions if the board has any.
Any questions from the board? All right. Thank you for the report. Very comprehensive and good to know that that information is available to us. So next I'd like to skip to the acceptance of the minutes for September 14th and October 5th. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at those? Would somebody like to make a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved, Barger.
Second, Broussard.
Roger Broussard.
Barger, yes.
Roger.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Full Janetti, yes. Town administrator notes, anything else? Poor Connor, you've been talking a lot tonight.
I think that means poor you and everyone else more than me. Just thank you to the town clerk's office, election staff, they are going to be working for weeks straight. They're doing a great job. They've had a lot put on them, and I have a lot of confidence in them, and they're doing a wonderful job. So thank you to them and all the town's employees across departments. They've been doing a really, really good job and having to do a lot of strange and different and often harder things this year than is normal. And I feel pretty confident saying that without exception, they've all stepped up and tried to do the right thing to keep serving the community. I appreciate their work and everyone in the community for continued patience and trying to be kind while everyone's going through a pretty difficult time.
Great, we agree. Any select board members? Craig, do you have anything to talk about?
Yes, I do. I had the opportunity on Saturday the 17th to participate in a ceremony with the Cub Scouts, Cub Scout Pack 76, where they honored 4 young men who crossed what they call crossing over to Scout Troop 42. They literally had a little bridge where they walked over the bridge. And I was joined by our 2 state senators, Michael Brady and Walter Timothy, as well as one of our state representatives, Claire Cronin. And I wanted to acknowledge James Arguello, Jonathan David, Darwin Block, and Jacob Slovin, the 4 young Cub Scout members who crossed over and are now Boy Scouts, part of Troop 42. It was a very nice ceremony in the outdoor chapel in back of the Congregational Church on Center Street, which I didn't know existed, and it was quite nice to see.
Great, thanks for attending that.
Absolutely, thanks, Craig.
Tom?
I would just, I want to express appreciation for all the effort that, as Connor alluded to, that the town clerk's office is doing, encourage our residents to get out and vote. I think that's super important. Credit to Easton for making it so easy to do. I've heard a lot of great feedback, Connor. So please pass that along and express my appreciation. And then also, I think it's great that we had the Halloween information about COVID. I think your map that had the colors explained it all. I think there's a lot of people across our entire nation that, for a lot of reasons, are getting fatigued or not engaging in the right way and are falling in a color that is not green. And I'm very appreciative that we are in green. So some people might get tired of talking COVID and sure, putting together a standard update is tiring, but it's appreciated, and I think we have to keep it front and center and make sure we stay in green. So appreciate it.
Great, thanks, Tom. Chuck?
No, I just echo what others have said already about the town clerk's office and the people that are helping out on the election planning. They've done a great job. That's all.
Thanks, Chuck. And Mark?
No comments.
Okay. I just have a couple of things that I want to pull out of the town crier that I thought were really important. October 17th and the 24th, the Farmers to Families at the Old Colony YMCA in Stoughton, they will be providing food at no cost through contactless pickup to families in need. So if you want more information on that, go to the town crier. It's from 10:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. or until the boxes are gone. So that's sadly a much needed service, and I think that we're very fortunate to have so much support in our communities. Also, October 22nd and the 24th, our age-friendly communities are having some information listening sessions. So take a look at that. I'm not going to read all the details, but it is in the town crier if you'd like to participate. And last but not least, this Saturday, October 24th from 10 to 2 at the police station is the drug take back. So you can turn in your expired medication for safe disposal. Over the counter and pet medications will be accepted. Only once a year do we do the Sharps take back. So in this kind of a program. They'll do it on Health Day for hazardous waste, but where we didn't have that in the spring, if you have sharps, needles and syringes will be accepted, and they must be in a puncture-proof container. Thermometers, IV bags, medical devices, and personal care products will not be accepted. The service is free and anonymous. If you can't make it Saturday, the police station has a kiosk where you can return your unwanted and expired drugs. That's the biggest first step that you can do to helping reduce substance use in our community, is to get rid of your expired medication. And please don't flush it down the toilet. That's a terrible thing for our environment. So just wanted to put in that plug. And if nobody has anything else, I would take a motion to adjourn.
Move, Barger.
Second, Broussard.
Barger, Broussard, and a roll call vote, Craig.
Barger, yes.
Broussard, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Full Janetti, yes. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate it. It feels very late. It's so dark so early now. Have a good week.
You too. Bye, Donna. Bye, everybody.
Good night.